My dad and his new wife, Sarah, along with her 2 teenage kids, moved into my home and secretly tried to sell it behind my back after my mom passed away. Eventually, I had to threaten legal action to protect what was rightfully mine. Hi, everyone. A lot has been going on in my life, and I feel like I'm drowning in it all. I decided to share my story here, hoping it might bring some clarity and maybe even some relief. Even if this doesn't fix things, just putting it out there feels like it might help, even if just a little. I grew up in what I thought was a typical, loving family. My parents had been married for over 30 years, and our family was close-knit. My mom was the heart and soul of our home, the one who held everything together. My dad was the quieter type, someone who worked tirelessly to provide for us. When my mom passed away unexpectedly, it turned our lives upside down. It was devastating for all of us, but my dad seemed to suffer the most. He was utterly lost without her. It was painful to watch as the loneliness slowly consumed him. About a year later, my dad met someone new, Sarah. At first, I was happy for him. I wanted him to find happiness again, and I thought Sarah might be what he needed to begin healing. Sarah was around my dad's age, divorced, and had 2 kids from her previous marriage. Her kids, Liam and Megan, were in their late teens and seemed like good kids. When Dad announced that he was going to marry Sarah, I wasn't too surprised. They had been dating for several months, and it felt inevitable. Although it seemed rushed, I kept my concerns to myself. I didn't want to burden Dad with my doubts. What mattered most was his happiness. After the wedding, Dad and Sarah moved into her small apartment with her kids. It wasn't ideal for them, but it was what they could afford. Meanwhile, I stayed in the home that had belonged to my mother, the house I had grown up in. It was filled with memories of my childhood, and it was my sanctuary, my last real connection to Mom. Things changed faster than I expected. Sarah's apartment was too cramped, and Dad started hinting that they needed more space. He casually brought up how my house had plenty of room and suggested it might make sense for them to move in with me. I was hesitant. This was my home, my safe space, the one place where I felt closest to Mom. Sharing it with Dad, Sarah, and her kids felt overwhelming. But I loved my dad and wanted to support him, so I reluctantly agreed. He reassured me that it would only be temporary, just until they could find a place of their own. At first, things were fine. Sarah was polite, her kids were respectful, and Dad seemed genuinely happy. I even began forming a bond with Liam and Megan. But slowly, things began to shift. Sarah started making little comments about how she thought the house could be better organized or how certain things should be arranged. I brushed it off at first, thinking she just wanted to feel at home. But her suggestions became more frequent, and soon, they weren't suggestions anymore. She started rearranging furniture, redecorating rooms, and even throwing out things she didn't like. What bothered me most was how she started referring to the house as if it were hers. She'd say things like, "In my house, I prefer things this way," or, "I think our home could use some updates." I tried to push back and assert that this was still my home, but Dad always intervened, asking me to be more understanding. The breaking point came when I discovered Sarah had already contacted contractors to renovate the kitchen, without even telling me. I was furious. This was my home, left to me by my mother. Yet, Sarah was acting like it was hers to do with as she pleased. It turns out my dad had been lying to Sarah all along. He had told her that the house was legally his and that he was letting me stay there out of generosity. In her mind, she thought that as his wife, the house was now hers as well. She believed she could do whatever she wanted to it, as a way to start fresh. When I confronted her, I was shocked at her attitude. She claimed that as the lady of the house, it was her responsibility to make it feel like a home for everyone. I calmly explained that this was my family's home, passed down to me by my mother, and that I wasn't going to let anyone change that. But as soon as I stood my ground, Sarah's demeanor changed. She accused me of clinging to the past, of being selfish, and of refusing to move on. She said I was putting my mother's memory above the happiness of the people living in the house now. At that point, Dad walked in and, to my dismay, immediately took Sarah's side. He berated me, calling me selfish and ungrateful, accusing me of refusing to move forward. His words cut deeper than I can express. But what hurt most was what he told me next. He admitted he had already started the process of legally adding Sarah's name to the house deed, effectively making them co-owners. I couldn't believe it. My own father was trying to take away the one thing my mother left me. In that moment, I told him I wasn't going to let it happen. I threatened to take legal action if he didn't stop. I left the house that day, packed a bag, and stayed with my cousin Lily, who's been my rock through all of this. With Lily's help, I got in touch with a lawyer, and we're now preparing to fight for my home and my mother's legacy. Update 1. Hi, everyone. I wanted to share an update on everything that's been happening since my last post. As I mentioned before, I've been staying with my cousin Lily. She's always been more like a sister to me, and I honestly don't know what I'd do without her. When I showed up on her doorstep after everything went down, she didn't hesitate to welcome me in. After I explained everything to Lily, she was absolutely furious on my behalf. She couldn't believe my dad and Sarah would try to take my house and told me straight up that I needed to stand my ground. She reminded me that letting them walk all over me now would set a precedent, that if I didn't fight for my rights, they'd keep taking advantage of me. Lily connected me with a lawyer she knows, someone she trusts and has worked with in the past. I've started discussing the situation with the lawyer, and they're confident we have a strong case. My mom's will explicitly states that the house was left to me, and that alone puts me in a solid legal position. But there's something else, too. I have a letter my mom wrote to me during her final days. It's a deeply personal letter that I've kept close to my heart since she passed away. In it, she explains how important the house is to our family. It's been passed down through generations of women in our family, and she made it clear that she wanted me to have it. That letter is not just sentimental, it's a powerful piece of evidence that shows my mother's intentions. I don't want to take this to court if I don't have to. The emotional toll it could take on me and my dad would be devastating, not to mention the financial cost. But at the same time, I can't sit back and let them take the house from me. I've decided to go back to the house and give my dad one last chance to do the right thing. I plan to tell him he has two options, either he and Sarah pack up and move out, or I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. This isn't a decision I'm making lightly, and it's certainly not something I want to do. But I have to protect my mother's legacy and the home that means so much to me. Sarah, meanwhile, has been sending me constant messages. Most of them are nasty and full of insults. She's called me selfish, spoiled, and unwilling to adapt to change. At first, her words stung, but now I've reached the point where I don't care what she thinks of me. Her opinion doesn't matter. What matters is that this house is my family's legacy, and she doesn't get to erase that. I'm nervous about going back to the house. I don't know how my dad will react, and there's a chance things could get even more heated. But I'm determined to stand my ground. This isn't just about the house, it's about everything my mom stood for and the memories that are tied to this place. I'll let you know what happens after I confront my dad. Thank you all for your encouragement, advice, and support. It's been a lifeline during one of the most difficult times in my life. Update 2. Things have gotten even worse, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around what I found out. I finally mustered up the courage to visit the house, hoping to have a calm and rational discussion with my dad. I wanted to believe that there was still a chance to resolve this without lawyers and courtrooms. But the moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was wrong. There was a car parked out front that I didn't recognize. At first, I thought maybe it belonged to one of Sarah's friends. But as I got closer, I saw my dad standing at the door with a man I'd never met before. His face went pale the moment he saw me, and he started stammering like he'd been caught red-handed. I demanded to know who the man was, and to my shock, he introduced himself as a real estate agent. My stomach dropped. A real estate agent. My dad was showing the house to potential buyers. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. He was actively trying to sell the home my mother had left me, the house I grew up in, behind my back. I turned to the agent and calmly but firmly told him the house was not for sale. I explained that I was the legal owner and that no sale could happen without my approval, which would never happen. The agent, clearly taken aback, muttered something about being told the house was on the market, then quickly excused himself and left. Inside, the house was unrecognizable. Every personal touch, every piece of my mom's history, was gone. Her favorite decorations, our family photos, my childhood keepsakes, everything had been replaced with random furniture and cheap-looking decor that felt cold and impersonal. It was like they had scrubbed every trace of my mom, and me, from the house. I felt like I was suffocating. The house, my sanctuary, now felt like a stranger's home. I turned to my dad and told him I was done playing nice. I informed him that if he didn't leave the house immediately, I would file a lawsuit for fraud and property theft. I also let him know I had a lawyer who was prepared to move forward if necessary. I never imagined it would come to this, threatening my own father with legal action. The pain was unbearable. This wasn't just about a house, it was about losing the last piece of my mom's legacy. What hurt the most was that my dad didn't seem to care. He was willing to sell out my mother's memory, just to appease Sarah. Update 3. Hi, everyone. I wanted to let you all know how things have unfolded since my last update. After everything that happened, Dad and Sarah have finally left the house. I don't know what made them decide to pack up and go, maybe it was my warning, or maybe they realized I wasn't bluffing about taking legal action, but they were out within 24 hours of my last confrontation with them. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was bittersweet. I never wanted things to escalate this far. I didn't want to see my relationship with my father fall apart. Yet, I couldn't allow them to take my mother's home from me. Before they left, I had one final conversation with Liam and Megan, Sarah's kids. I wanted to make it clear to them that none of this was their fault. They were innocent in all of this and didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of a fight between their mother, my dad, and me. To my surprise, they were incredibly understanding. Liam and Megan admitted they didn't agree with what their mom had done and told me they'd always felt the house was mine. I apologized to them for the situation, explaining that I wasn't trying to hurt them and that I didn't want them to feel like they were being punished for their mother's choices. What truly touched me was when they handed me a small box. Inside were some of my mom's paintings that had been taken down when Sarah redecorated the house. I had thought those paintings were gone forever, but Liam and Megan had saved them, knowing how much they meant to me. I was so moved by their kindness. In the middle of all this chaos and heartbreak, that small gesture reminded me that there was still good in all of this. I gave both Liam and Megan my phone number and told them they were welcome to visit anytime. I don't hold anything against them, and I wanted them to know they'd always have a place in my life, even if their mother didn't. As for my dad, he tried one last time to convince me to let them stay in the house. He offered to sign a rental agreement or come up with some other arrangement, but by then, it was too late. The trust between us had been broken. I told him the same thing I'd told him before, the only options were for them to leave or for me to take them to court. Sarah, on the other hand, didn't handle things as gracefully. She spent their final hours in the house slamming doors, muttering under her breath, and throwing things around in an obvious attempt to provoke me. But I was done letting her antics get to me. I ignored her completely and focused on the end goal, getting them out of the house for good. When they finally left, I stood in the empty living room, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. The house was mine again, but it didn't feel the same. It had been stripped of the warmth and comfort it once held. The walls felt hollow, and the memories of my mother seemed distant. Since then, I've been working tirelessly to restore the house to the way it was. I've been putting everything back where it belongs, rehanging my mom's paintings, restoring the furniture to its original places, and slowly undoing all the changes Sarah made. It's been a lot of work, but it's also been healing. With every step, I feel like I'm reclaiming not just the house, but my connection to my mother. It hasn't been easy. There are moments when the weight of everything hits me all at once, and I wonder if it was worth it. I think about the strain this has put on my relationship with my dad and whether things will ever go back to the way they were. I think about how different things would have been if my mom were still here, how she would have known what to say, what to do. But deep down, I know I made the right choice. This house is more than just a building. It's a symbol of everything my mother worked for, everything she valued. It's the legacy she left behind, and I'm determined to honor that legacy. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my dad. Right now, things are strained, and we haven't spoken much since he left the house. Part of me hopes we can reconcile someday, but another part of me is still angry and hurt. I need time to process everything before I can even think about rebuilding that relationship. I want to thank all of you for your kindness and support throughout this entire ordeal. Your advice, encouragement, and understanding gave me the strength to keep fighting, even when I felt like giving up. Knowing that there were people out there who believed in me made all the difference. For now, I'm focusing on the future, on restoring the house, on healing, and on finding peace. This has been one of the hardest battles I've ever faced, but it's also taught me so much about resilience, about standing up for what's right, and about honoring the people we love. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for watching the video, subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.